but it's Friday. There's lots of traffic coming out from Athens, and we just had to be flexible and adjust, which is what we did. And we decided that the session of the morning, the two sessions, will become one after the other without the lunch break. So I hope you are not starving, because you will have to go through the two sessions that will be moderated by my friend Gina Belafonte over there, to whom I will hand over in a second. Gina and I met in Germany at an event that Jochen Sandig organized with his wife Sasha, called Zuhören. Zuhören meaning listening, because we heard yesterday from Gerasimos the importance of unlearning, but probably we don't remember enough how important it is to learn to listen. So that very, very inspiring event in Berlin allowed me to meet Gina. And one thing that brought us together was the fact, she being the daughter of Harry Belafonte, of course, she had just made a wonderful documentary about her father. The documentary is called Sing Your Song. And it's a beautiful film where Harry Belafonte, late in his life, explains how, through the art and through activism, he literally tried to change the world. In fact, it was what Gina calls today artivism, and this is something we very much believe in at the World Human Forum. So, Gina, thank you for being here. I'm handing over to you, and you will lead the two sessions of the morning. So please join me with a big applause.
Good morning. So thank you. In the United States, many of us, when we say good morning, we are always looking for a call and response. So good morning. Hello, thank you. Thank you for your patience. I'm very excited for this conversation today. We're talking about things that are mysteries to us. And what I would like to do first is read something that will start off the conversation this morning, because we're talking about something in the United States especially that we tend to not talk about, something that we don't engage in a positive way. We fear it quite a bit, and that is death. Death often evokes a deep fear of the unknown, as it represents a transition into a realm beyond our understanding. This fear may stem from uncertainty about what, if anything, lies beyond what we currently refer to as life, leaving many to grapple with feelings of powerlessness. Yet facing death with acceptance can offer peace, allowing us to embrace the mystery rather than be paralyzed by it. So in saying that, I would like to invite our panelists up to have a conversation, a discussion about death, about the mystery of death, and also how we care for ourselves in the process of dying, how we care for our families, how we care for our elders. And with that, I would also like to invite the ancestors into this session to guide us, to be with us, to inform us of our conversation. So please come and join me, Aliki, Theodoros, Anthony, and Kali. Poppy. Kalliopi. Thank you. I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves because I don't speak Greek and we will need proper pronunciation. Welcome. Yes. Poppy will speak in Greek. Yes. And so if you don't understand Greek, you should put your headphones. If you don't have the QR code for the translation, please make sure you get it. Okay.
Καλή σας ημέρα, με ακούτε? Καλή σας ημέρα. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ το Human Forum για την μεγάλη ευκαιρία που μου έδωσε να είμαι εδώ σε αυτό το τόσο ενδιαφέρον συμπόσιο. Όπως ξέρουμε όλοι, η Ελευσίνα τον περασμένο χρόνο, το 2023, ήταν πολιτιστική πρωτεύουσα της Ευρώπης. Όμως, η Ελευσίνα στην αρχαιότητα υπήρξε για πάρα πολλούς αιώνες η πνευματική, η αδιαφυσβήτητη πνευματική πρωτεύουσα του ελληνορωμαϊκού κόσμου. Άνθρωποι από όλη την Ελλάδα και αργότερα από όλες τις άκρες της Ρωμαϊκής Αυτοκρατορίας συνέρεαν στο ιερό της Δήμητρας και της Περσεφόνης και αναρωτιόμαστε για ποιο λόγο. Δεν ξέρουμε τι ακριβώς συνέβαινε στα Ελευσίνια μυστήρια, όμως γνωρίζουμε ότι οπωσδήποτε τους δινότανε μία υπόσχεση ευδαιμονίας. Ευδαιμονίας γιατί? Από τον ομηρικό ύμνο στη Δήμητρα, που είναι, ας πούμε, το ιδρυτικό κείμενο της Ελευσινιακής λατρείας, που είναι ένα ποίημα του τέλους του 7ου αιώνα π.Χ., δηλαδή γύρω στο 600, η Δήμητρα μας λέει την αρπαγή της Περσεφόνης, πώς ξαναγυρίζει, αναγκάζει η Δήμητρα το Δία, τέλος πάντων, να επιστρέψει η κόρη της πίσω, και πώς η Δήμητρα, δείχνοντας την ευγνωμοσύνη της στους Ελευσίνιους που την φιλοξένησαν στη διάρκεια του πένθους της, τους κάνει 2 μεγάλα δώρα για ευδαιμονία. Τα 2 μεγάλα δώρα ήταν το ένα η καλλιέργεια της γης, ο πλούτος από την καλλιέργεια της γης, και αυτό ήταν για το σωματικό μέρος του ανθρώπου, και το άλλο ήταν τα Ελευσίνια μυστήρια. Είναι αυτό που μας το λέει ο ύμνος, ότι ευτυχισμένοι θα είναι αυτοί ανάμεσα στους ανθρώπους που θα έχουν δει αυτά τα μυστήρια, γιατί οι άλλοι θα ζήσουν στο μαύρο σκοτάδι του Άδη. Τι να ήταν άραγε αυτό το μαύρο σκοτάδι του Άδη που φοβούνται οι άνθρωποι και σήμερα και τότε? Ας δούμε πώς έβλεπαν οι άνθρωποι εκείνη την εποχή το σκοτάδι του Άδη. Ξέρουμε από την 11η ραψοδία της Οδύσσιας, τη λάμδα ραψοδία, τη λεγόμενη Νέκια. Νέκης είναι ο νεκρός στα αρχαία ελληνικά. Νέκια είναι η ιεροτελεστία που γίνεται για να προσεγγίσουν τους νεκρούς. Ο Οδυσσέας, λοιπόν, για να κατέβει στον Άδη, περνάει τη χώρα των Κυμμερίων, περνάει τον ωκεανό, πηγαίνει σε ένα σκοτεινό μέρος και εκεί σκάβει ένα λάκκο και θυσιάζει κρυάρια. Με το μαύρο αίμα των κρυαριών προσελκύει τις ψυχές των νεκρών. Ο Οδυσσέας βασικά θέλει να ρωτήσει τον Τηρεσία για την επιστροφή του στην Ιθάκη, αλλά αφού τον ρωτάει, πλησιάζει η μητέρα του, η σκιά της μητέρας του, την οποία προσπαθεί να αγκαλιάσει. 3 φορές προσπαθεί να την αγκαλιάσει και 3 φορές του ξεφεύγει. Ο Όμηρος μας λέει, σαν σκιά ονείρου, σαν σκιά, σαν όνειρο του ξεφεύγει μέσα από τα χέρια. Και ρωτάει ο Οδυσσέας, μα με ξεγελάει η Περσεφόνη, η βασίλισσα του Άδη, η σοφή Περσεφόνη, μου παίζει μαζί μου παιχνίδια? Και του λέει η μητέρα του, όχι παιδί μου, αυτή είναι η μοίρα των θνητών. Αποχωρίζονται από την σάρκα και παραμένει μόνο η ψυχή. Το πώς βλέπουν, λοιπόν, εκείνη την εποχή τον Άδη, μας το λέει παρακάτω η Οδύσσια. Αρχίζει να ρωτάει ο Οδυσσέας τους διάφορους ήρωες που είναι στον Άδη και ρωτάει τον περίφημο Αχιλλέα, «Αχιλλέα, εσύ που ήσουν τόσο ένδοξος, αλλά ακόμη και τώρα εδώ κάτω στον Άδη ένδοξος θα είσαι». Και του απαντάει ο Αχιλλέας αυτό που βλέπετε. «Αχ, Οδυσσέα, μην προσπαθείς να με παρηγορήσεις. Μακάρι να ήμουν πάνω στη γη ο τελευταίος υπηρέτης ενός ανθρώπου φτωχού κιόλας, που να μην έχει και μεγάλο πλήρο, παρά να είμαι εδώ άρχοντας και βασιλιάς στον Άδη». Αυτό το φοβερό φόβο, λοιπόν, με κάποιο τρόπο ξέρουμε, δεν ξέρουμε τι ακριβώς γινότανε, ξέρουμε όμως ότι οπωσδήποτε τον απάλυναν, υπήρχε κάποια υπόσχεση από τη μοίηση στα ελευσίνια μυστήρια. Αυτοί που θα εμειούνται, λοιπόν, οι εκλεκτοί που θα είχαν περάσει αυτή τη δοκιμασία, θα είχαν καλύτερη τύχη. Μας το λέει το περίφημο απόσπασμα του Σοφοκλή, ότι 3 και 4 φορές μακαρισμένοι θα είναι αυτοί που τα έχουν δει αυτά, γιατί μόνο για αυτούς θα είναι καλή η τύχη στον Άδη. Μας το λέει και ένα απόσπασμα του Πινδάρου, που μας λέει ότι ευτυχισμένος θα είναι αυτός εκεί που θα κατεβεί στον Άδη αφού θα τα έχει δει, αφού θα περάσει, θα ξέρει και την τελετή, το τέλος του βίου, αλλά θα ξέρει και την αρχή του βίου. Δηλαδή, και για την ίδια του τη ζωή και για τη μεταθάνατο τύχη του, θα είναι θετική η μοίησή του στα μυστήρια. Αλλά τι ήτανε, λοιπόν, πώς επερχόταν αυτό το πράγμα. Δεν ξέρουμε τι ακριβώς γινότανε. Ξέρουμε όμως ότι είχαν 3 στοιχεία. Το ένα ήτανε τα λεγόμενα, κάποιες οδηγίες θα τους δινότανε και γι' αυτό έπρεπε μία προϋπόθεση ήταν να μιλάνε ελληνικά. Άλλες προϋποθέσεις δεν υπήρχαν, γιατί άντρες, γυναίκες, πλούσιοι, φτωχοί, ανεξάρτητα από την κοινωνική τους θέση, ακόμα και δούλοι μπορούσαν να μοιηθούν, αλλά έπρεπε να ήταν λοιπόν τα λεγόμενα, αυτό που θα τους έλεγαν, τα δεικνύμενα, γι' αυτό ο ανώτατος ιερέας ήταν ο ιεροφάντης, αυτός που φανέρωνε τα ιερά, και τα δρόμενα, θα γινόταν κάποια αναπαράσταση. Μας λέει λοιπόν ένα γνωστό απόσπασμα του Αριστοτέλη, ότι στα ελευσίνια μυστήρια οι τελούμενοι, οι μύστες, δεν περιμένουν ότι θα μάθουν κάτι, αλλά ότι θα έχουν μία εμπειρία, ότι θα έρθουν σε μία κατάσταση. Πώς φανταζόμαστε ότι αυτή θα ήταν η κατάσταση? Όλη αυτή η αναπαράσταση, μέσα στη νύχτα, με τη μουσική τυμπάνων, αυλών, ήταν ένα είδος δρόμενου, αλλά όχι δρόμενου όπως το θέατρο, όπου ο θεατής απαθής παρακολουθεί. Ήταν ένα δρόμενο όπου συμμετείχαν στο πάθος, στη λύπη της Δήμητρας, στο ψάξιμο της Περσεφόνης. Όλο αυτό προφανώς δημιουργούσε μία κατάσταση, μία εμπειρία, η οποία ίσως και ήταν αδύνατον να περιγραφεί, να μπει σε λόγια. Και μία ερμηνεία ίσως το ότι τα ελευσίνια μυστήρια παραμένουν μυστήρια, είναι ότι δεν μπορούσε κανείς να περιγράψει ακριβώς τι γινότανε στα ελευσίνια μυστήρια. Και μια και είμαστε όλοι εδώ, φτάσαμε όλοι εδώ, νομίζω ότι είμαστε τυχεροί, γιατί όπως λέει ένας ποιητής του πρώτου αιώνα, του πρώτου προχριστιανικού αιώνα, ο Κριναγόρας, ακόμα και αν έχεις ζήσει μια καθιστική ζωή και δεν έχεις ταξιδέψει ποτέ, δεν έχεις πάει με πλοίο, δεν έχεις διασχίσει τη θάλασσα με πλοίο, δεν έχεις ταξιδέψει στις μεγάλες οδούς, όμως μία φορά στη ζωή σου πρέπει να πας στην Αττική μόνο και μόνο για να ζήσεις να ζήσεις στα ελευσίνια μυστήρια, γιατί αυτά θα σου δώσουν και μία έγνοια, θα σου απαλύνουν κάθε έγνοια για την τωρινή ζωή σου, αλλά θα είσαι ευτυχισμένος και όταν θα πας σε αυτούς, στους πλείονες, στους περισσότερους, τις γενιές όλων αυτών που έχουν πάει στον Άδη. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yes, we will now pass the mic to Anthony Bossis. So it still remains a mystery.
Yes.
It still remains a mystery.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm not going to speak in Greek. I'm not going to speak in English. I'm going to speak in New York English. It's like its own thing. So got to slow the tape down. It's great to be here. Alexandra, Mirto, the entire team. It's great to be here again. This is an incredible event and getting better every year. How many people here are familiar with psychedelics? Good. Wow. So we're going to talk, I'm going to speak for about half an hour now, then again in the afternoon on two topics. How we don't die too well in the world. And so I work primarily with people who are dying at the end of life in palliative care. And we're going to talk about some novel psychedelic research that's been going on for about 70 years that is helping people die with greater acceptance and less emotional anguish. Yeah, is that better? So what is death? What is death? We're talking about human flourishing, and part of living well means dying well. They're not separate, right? Death isn't the end of life, it's part of life. And our cultures have a really hard time with that. I have to say somewhat proudly, in America the past 25 years there's been a quiet revolution in palliative care and thanatology, Greek word. By the way, I'm a proud Greek American. How many Greek Americans here? Any? Bravo. It's great to be a Greek American growing up like when we did. And it's very meaningful to come back here and do work. We don't die so well, but in America, as I was beginning to say, it's been quite lovely the past couple of decades to see palliative care really grow in an incredible way. And culturally, the conversation of death and dying is kind of taking off in a pretty profound way. It's still taboo. We have a long way to go, but every month or so there's a best-selling book on death. We have end-of-life doulas. We have death over dinner. We have hospice. We have a lot of conversations. And every weekend and every week and throughout the year there's just so much in terms of events and conferences. So we're talking about it. And Greece is a little behind, but we got to get Greece moved up a little bit in expanding palliative care and how we think about death. I know Theo's going to speak about a little of that later on today. So we're going to cover a little bit of both, and I'll come back later and discuss the research in detail. Quickly, this research with psychedelics, and I'll define what they are in a minute, began really in the 1950s. And the first two clinical indications for doing it, one was for alcoholism. And for those who know the story of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson, who founded Alcoholics Anonymous, had done psychedelics, had done LSD, and it confirmed for him the spiritual experience, what was the way, was the path towards not drinking. The other indication back then was for people with terminal cancer who had severe emotional, psychological, spiritual distress. And they found that one dose of a high dose of a psychedelic, in those days they used LSD primarily, that produced this profound mystical experience, and we're going to talk about that today, dramatically reduced their depression, anxiety, hopelessness, and even fostered a greater acceptance of death. Because we're all dying. You don't like when I point to you, right? It feels weird. You're going to die, you're going to die, I'm going to die. But we still deny it. We walk around like, And we're here at Eleusis, which is what, I mean, that's the theme. That's one of the themes. So, look forward to spending the day together. Oh, let me read something to start. Joan Halifax, Roshi Joan Halifax is a Zen Roshi who, and a colleague of mine. And she runs a beautiful place in New Mexico called Opaya, where they work with people who are dying. And it's like a Zen hospice, but it's really incredible. She has a great book I recommend called Being with Dying. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful book. Interesting note, historically, Joan was married to Stan Grof, who was one of the original psychedelic researchers back in the goes back to the even earlier, but 1960s in America doing the research. Now she's not, but she's a very well-known Zen Roshi talking about these things. Let me read a little quote from her book. One who is free of fear knows that at the deepest level of realization, there is no suffering, no birth, no death. Each moment is new and complete. Right now being born, right now dying. All phenomena are in flux. Riding the waves of impermanence, the elements come together as form and dissolve into formlessness. In some sense, we are never born, we will never die. When we realize our true nature, that absolute space, free of birth and death, it is possible to dwell in this relative body without the fear of loss. We can leave behind fearfulness, denial, sorrow, defiance, and even acceptance to reach true liberation. This is our practice for a realized death. So I'm going to go through some of these slides quickly in the service of time, but I recently put the date under this op-ed to remind myself how many years I'm showing that slide. And I'm happy to say things are better. That was 2006. There was a time in America where you didn't discuss death in medical school, as if the person didn't die. We didn't discuss it in our programs. And now it's very different. Really, we have a long way to go, but we're getting there in the States, and it's important. And just one note on that. And that all began in the 20th century. So in the 1800s in America, when you died, typically your body stayed in the house for a few days. And death was in the community, it was in the family. People came, it was part of the experience. But with modern medicine in the early 1900s, death got pushed behind closed doors. We stopped talking about it. So did birth. Women began having babies behind curtains and closed doors where the men couldn't even be there. So it was as if we're blocking out birth and death, as if there's no birth and death, we just get here somehow, and but we're getting better at all of this. In 1997, in America, the Institute of Medicine made a very strong mandate. We need to prove how we die in this country. And again, we're getting much better, but still a recent study showed at the end of life are depressed. Depression's gone up 26%. And we know depression could lead to a desire for suicide thinking or suicide. And we're going to speak about this a few times today. It's a construct called demoralization. Who's heard this word before, demoralization? Great, wow. So it's a very recently and very researched term that people at the end of life often have. And it's different from depression. And I don't want to spend too much time on all the details of it, but let me go back a second. It's mainly this profound sense of hopelessness, loss of meaning, and existential spiritual distress. And the thing is that people at the end of life, many research is showing, are not depressed when we give them certain scales to see what their status is, but they're demoralized. And we didn't know that for years. We didn't measure that. The sad thing is that depression can be treated with medication, SSRIs, antidepressants, to some degree. But it doesn't affect demoralization. Because demoralization is a loss of meaning. What we know now is that What does help those people is cultivating personal meaning. So there are meaning-making psychotherapies. And what we found a few years ago, 1 dose of psilocybin, a psychedelic we're going to talk about, dramatically reduced people with cancer, their demoralization. And we have a new study about to start where we're going to look at demoralization in 5 different hospitals across the country. For those who don't know palliative care, it regards life and dying as normal processes. It neither hastens nor postpones death. It integrates the spiritual aspect of who we are, our spiritual essence. It encourages a life review, discusses value, meaning making. I'm not going to go into the science too much here, but again, people who are depressed, 4 times more likely to hurt themselves or kill themselves. And if the depression is treated, that desire for a hastened death disappears. We have to treat people at the end of life. Some people think, well, if you're old and you're dying or young and dying, by the way, people always say, oh, you work with the dying, a lot of old people. No. People in their 30s, 40s, and 50s too are dying of diseases, right? But people think, well, of course you'd be sad and depressed. No, we can treat depression even at the end of life. A very important study years ago, not about psychedelics, did a big meta-analysis. What are the most important features at the end of life that can help people? The 2 most important features were meaning and transcendence. Finding meaning and the experience of transcending. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And for me, that study is the rationale for the psychedelic research. People say, what do psychedelics do? They do a lot of things, and we're going to talk about it throughout the day. I think what they do, primarily, among many things they do, is help us recalibrate suffering, form a different relationship to our human suffering, so we can be more free to experience the joy of this life. And that's done typically through finding meaning, through this transcendent, altered state. And if there's one takeaway you take away today, is that not only psychedelics do this, humans are wired for meaning. These altered states of experience, meaning-making, transcendence, all of this, they've been happening throughout the arc of human history. They happened a few feet from here at Eleusis. They happened in every country, every civilization. Psychedelics generate it in a very profound way. But people have these experiences of transcendence all the time. Who knows Viktor Frankl? Hands. Viktor Frankl. Oh, one. Good. Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. He then went to develop a meaning-making therapy called logotherapy from the Greek. And it's a great book, second book to write down, Man's Search for Meaning, one of the greatest books of the 20th century. One of his quotes, meaning can be found in life up to the last moment, up to the last breath, even in the face of death. And we know spirituality and meaning protects us against severe anguish at the end of life and even throughout life. One more quote by Viktor Frankl. I'm going to upgrade it from man to humans. Humans are not destroyed by suffering. We're destroyed by suffering without meaning. Think about that. And this isn't the place for this conversation, but we're in this weird zeitgeist, if you haven't noticed, in the world. Things aren't so great on some levels. It's a strange time, isn't it? And while it feels perilous, I think it's also precarious. It's also, I think, there's some promise for hopefully good change. That's why you're having these conferences. But I think there's a lack of meaning, a loss of meaning in our lives, culturally. And we heard yesterday from those great guys on all the digital stuff and the phones. We're losing something, and it's affecting who we are as people. I'm just going to run through that because I want to. So, actually, let me go back because we're about there. Cicely Saunders was the founder of hospice. And sure, you can find a degree of wholeness as a person, whether you get better or not, whether you suffer or not. I've seen people find wholeness as they die. We can be healed at the very end of life. Healing is separate from the body being cured. The body could be failing, the body's dying, the body will stop working. But we're not our bodies, we're something more than a body. we can be healed. We can be transformed even with a sick body. And the great Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote, if you're whole again, you're healed. So, we need treatments to treat people who are at the end of life. And so this is where the psychedelic part of this comes in. So back in the 1960s, and they began this research, and they found that this one dose, one experience with a psychedelic in some patients, and many patients, could produce this transformative mystical experience and change how that person thinks about death. So now it's kind of all over the news in America. It's coming to Greece now, I hear it. And it began in the popular thing with Michael Pollan's magazine. There was an article about our research, and he wrote a book. So now it's out there. Maybe a little too fast for my taste, but it's out there. And we want to make the best of it. Psychedelic, from the Greek. Every word's from the Greek, you know that. Psyche meaning soul, and, to develop, to manifest who we are, our mind. They're also called entheogens, becoming divine. Just real quick, they're being used for a lot of indications. We're not going to discuss all of these. We're going to focus on end-of-life emotional distress. But that's some of the indications we're looking at in the research in the States. And we're not going to discuss all the psychedelics, but just to show you how many there are. These are this is an important class. This is what we think of psychedelics. They're called classic psychedelics, and they work in a similar way in the brain along serotonergic pathways. There's psilocybin, which is our drug we're going to talk about today, and that comes from a mushroom that grows on the earth. There's LSD that was invented or discovered, created in a laboratory in 1938 by Albert Hofmann. There's DMT, which is found in nature and in animals and humans too, we think. And mescaline from cactus. So some are natural, some are synthetic. People also hear about MDMA, that's a man-made drug, and ketamine, but we're not going to discuss those today. Well, we could in the Q&A if you like. You want to discuss those? We may. So what is psilocybin? It's been around for millennia. It's been used for, thousands of years by cultures for spiritual purposes. The Aztecs called it the flesh of the gods to help them heal. I won't get into the neuroscience, but it works along, as I said, serotonergic pathways. They do not lead to addiction. And some survey studies show people who use psychedelics over the arc of their lifetime have a reduced likelihood for suicidal thinking or depression. Interesting. It's an example of it in the Mayan culture, 1000 BC, you see the mushroom stones. It's an important part of their transformative life. In the Rig Veda, there was a drug, soma. That's not a mushroom. People think it was. It was the Torah and cannabis, but if you read the line there from the Rig Veda, when they drank it, they felt immortal. They conquered death. And here we are, Poppy, here we are. Poppy's become famous now the last 20 years. So what happened at Eleusis? We don't know. I'm not going to talk about it too much today. But of course they drank the Kikion, and we'll hear more about it today. Who knows what happened? Some say there was a psychedelic compound in there. Possible. Some say there wasn't. But something happened. And I like the idea that we don't know. Because it's not about the drug. It's about the experience humans can have. There's a lot of research on peak experiences. Exercise and prayer and meditation and being with nature and music and being in love. Well, we have lots of ways to feel connected. And prayer. It's a mystery. It really is a mystery, as death is. Now, I was early 2004 or so, 20 years ago, I went to Eleusis. And my story is I was so impressed with my body of knowledge about Eleusis and the psychedelics that I wrote Poppy in advance, and I'm a researcher from America. I want to come and talk to you about Gikion. And I come with my stack of papers, and she's generous and sees me, and I see there's all this evidence that it was a psychedelic compound, and look what we're doing in America with the research. And she just says no. in a very generous way. Because we don't know. We don't know. And there's something about maybe the myth and the ritual, and they were fasting, and a lot of things we don't know about the era. We can't transplant ourselves and put us in that era and know what they did. But something happened. How come I look older and you don't? Because you live in Greece. So fast forward real quick, 2,000 years. So LSD was being used in the 50s and 60s for research, for this incredible state it could produce. And no one ever heard of mushrooms at that point, of the magic mushroom. In 1957, a banker of all things and his wife went to Mexico because they've heard about these magic mushrooms. And they met this woman here, Maria Sabina, who was a healer, shaman, and she invited them into a ceremony with mushrooms. He had a very powerful experience, and he wrote about it in this Life magazine. And immediately, mushrooms became very well known. Albert Hofmann, who synthesized LSD, began to synthesize mushrooms from the psilocybin. A couple of guys at Harvard named Tim Leary, Dick Alpert, who became Ram Dass, and Ralph Metzner began doing research, and the 1960s began with psilocybin and LSD. It's important that we honor where we came from, because people have been doing these medicines and having these experiences for much longer than we've been doing it. And I love this photograph. So the gentleman with on the right side here with the vest, adorable man right there, is Humphrey Osmond, the great researcher at Saskatchewan, Canada, who's doing the first research with LSD and alcoholism. And actually, he became a friend of the great Aldous Huxley, and they coined the word psychedelic. But they're here with Native American people in the 1950s, observing the ritual to learn about how humans can use these altered states for transformation, not for fun, although it can be fun. Who's laughing? It can be fun. The Greek Psychedelic Society is laughing. So, we're going to talk about this mystical experience real quick, but it's important. So psychedelics do a lot of things. I don't like the term, what is the psychedelic experience? Because there's countless experiences you could have on a psychedelic. Good ones, bad ones, all kinds of things. Because all it does, affects brain chemistry in some way, we don't know. And it alters consciousness for a period of time. And by the way, I feel like this opens the doors into a larger landscape of consciousness. And one of the experiences people can have is this mystical experience or peak experience. And they developed a scale back 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And they gleaned these features from mystical experience that is found throughout human nature, the arc of human history. And we still use it today. It's much more reliable and scientifically validated. And we're finding that the people who have a complete mystical experience do better with their suffering at the end of life. There's something about these features. One is unity, a subjective sense when you're in this altered state, that all things are connected. All people and things are connected. We're connected, each of us. The person not thinks it, feels it. And that has pro-social implications as well. If we're connected, how do we kill each other? The noetic quality from William James, a sense that one's encountering ultimate reality, ultimate knowledge. A sense of sacredness, awe, humility, holiness, wonder. Positive moods, love is spoken about a lot. But I want to underscore there's also very dark experiences. When you enter the landscape of consciousness, you don't know what's going to come up. Theoretically, everything's within us. So there could be dark experiences, terrorizing experiences, and that's why for thousands of years it was done in a very container or framework with someone who knew those states of consciousness. And that's how we do the research as well. Ineffability, impossible to describe, but people do in a beautiful way. And importantly, transcendence. Literally feeling as if you're transcending time and space. Transcending this body we have. Consensus reality. Now, if you're sick with a disease, and I'm sure somebody here today has someone in their family who's sick and maybe dying, maybe somebody here is sick. If your body is beginning to fail and will soon stop working, of course, the thought is, the feeling, well, when that stops, I stop, whatever the I is. But what people tell us often is that through this, as if they're pulling the lens back and seeing themselves in a much larger landscape, they have the experience that I'm not my cancer, I'm not my body, I'm something more enduring, whatever self is. And that's a gift. It's a gift if your body is beginning to fail and if death is around the corner. And we don't know what happens at death, but they accept that mystery and they accept the idea that I'm more than my body. Albert Einstein, who was a mystic, there's no doubt about that, he was a mystic. All his theories came through very profound altered states of consciousness, not like these, but he wrote, the most profound and beautiful emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. He who does not know it is as good as dead. But we see throughout human history, people talk about this experience. In the early 60s, there was a very famous trial where they gave psilocybin from the mushroom to a bunch of theology students. They gave the other half of students a placebo, no drug. The ones who had the psilocybin had a complete mystical experience. And that was the first time that scale was used. That's the room where it took place in Boston at Marsh Chapel. One of the participants was Houston Smith, and you heard about him 2 days ago. Phil talked about Houston Smith, a great comparative religion scholar. In 2006, the first study to be done on this new era of psychedelic research replicated that, where they gave psilocybin to healthy people, and 2/3 said it was a mystical experience and called it the most meaningful experience of their lifetime, or top 5 most. And then we began our research with end of life. Why? What is it about these features that are so important? And why we wired for meaning? Why would nature do that? Why do we have these experiences? Now, the Darwinian will tell me that, well, if you have meaning and you have these experiences, you huddle together and the species survives and all of this stuff. Maybe it's true. Or maybe there's something else to it. Maybe this is a portal into who we are. Maybe this is a way to understand our nature. Let me read a few of these. This is that first study, healthy people, not dying people, but even if you're healthy, this experience often brings you into a space of addressing birth, fear, and permanence. One person wrote, she experienced death. She's a healthy person. The experience of death, which was very uncomfortable, followed by absolute peace and being in the presence of God. And these weren't religious people necessarily. It was so awesome to be with God that words can't describe it. To cease to be was not frightening. It was safe and much greater than I have words for, understanding. Whatever it is that's holding us together, that felt good. The part that sticks out for me is that we're all connected. And we're going to talk about that a lot today. Interconnectionists. And Aristotle talked about that with his concept. People often speak about grief. If you read the bottom part of the quote, very often people come out of the experience and they're crying during the experience often. And sometimes they're crying for their own life and their own situation. Sometimes they'll say, I'm just crying for humankind, how we treat each other, the bittersweetness of this world. And there are survey studies comparing a psychedelic spiritual experience to ones that occur naturally, and we see similar features. 70% say that state's more real than this reality. 75% said it was benevolent, it was eternal, it was meaningful. So they're similar. It appears that this experience is like the ones found at the mystical core of the great traditions or religions that we're wired for. I'm going to stop in a second and pick up later. We'll stop with my hero, Aldous Huxley. Who knows Aldous Huxley? There you go. So he was very helpful in advancing our awareness of psychedelics. His first wife died, and he wanted to understand it. The cute guy in the Native American tent before, Humphrey Osmond, sent Huxley some mescaline. He took mescaline in the 1950s. That's an actual picture of him on his first mescaline trip in Los Angeles. He was almost blind, Aldous Huxley. I love that photo because it's a historical photo, but I love it also because only an English, literary, classy guy like him would come to a psychedelic trip with a tweed jacket and lovely pants. It was classy stuff. And he wrote, of course, The Doors of Perception. I'm going to stop there. We'll pick up at that slide in part 2, and we'll talk more about the history of psychedelic research and our findings today, and how this may be helpful. It has been helpful so far in the findings in helping people address the end of their life. And we're going to talk about, in a discussion throughout the day later, how do we implement this into a culture? How do we drop these incredible experiences into a culture that may not be so prepared? How do we use the medicines in a way that are safe? How do we honor them and use them in a way that is honoring the experience, but ourselves as well? The problem with all the press now in America, there's a lot of it. A lot of it's great. Some of it's a bit tacky and sensationalist. And so we need good advice and good principles of what these medicines are, how they can help us. Let me stop for there. We'll pick up at this in the second half. Let me pass it on.
Okay. Thank you. Awesome. I want to say that I'm learning quite a bit already. When I think of the mysteries and Eleusis and the pilgrimage was really, and then what I also heard was when the pilgrimage was over that they were not to speak. Whoever participated was not to speak, and I'm thinking the mystery is discovering the process of dying or death itself. And in the last year and a half of my life, I have had 6 family members and 2 friends pass away. And it's a lot of grief. It's a lot of, some died suddenly, some died slowly. And I know that with each person, especially that was close to me, the opportunity to have a deeper relationship to death and dying, to have a deeper understanding of the process, certainly provided me with more compassion for the person who was processing it, and the gift one can have to witness someone going through the process of dying. And I feel a little bit though that if dying, if a psychedelic experience is similar to that of crossing over, more people would do psychedelics and they wouldn't be as afraid of dying. But I want to transition the conversation a little bit to the care that we give. In the United States, we have hospice, which is similar to palliative care, if not the same. And I know that it provides a tremendous amount of relief, not only for the person dying, but also for the living, to be able to know that their loved one is being handled with care and to have a deeper understanding. So please, thank you.
Thank you very much. Great introduction. You're absolutely right. Palliative care is for both, people that are suffering, but also for the caregivers. So it's for all of them. So first of all, thank you to the organizers for giving me this chance to be here, where the end of life is both approached from a scientific, but also from the arts point of view, which is not very usual in medicine, which is my background. I would first like you to think of one thing. What do we mean by end of life? And possibly you have not thought that we have different things in mind when we're talking about the end of life. For instance, if you talk to a medical oncologist, and he or she sees a person who has advanced cancer, and they think that the therapeutic options that they have may not be very effective, they would say that this person is at the end of their lives, but they're meaning about months or possibly a year or two. If we're talking in palliative care about the end of life and what we should be doing in the end of life, we're talking mostly about the last days or the last hours of life. And what is it that we should be doing? What are the priorities for the patient? What are the priorities for the family? And first of all, it was what I said before. We had to do a prognostication. Is it really the end of life? Is death imminent? Is it days, weeks? And we have to communicate that to the patient. We really don't think that death is coming, but, in the hours before, and we need to prepare. So we need to communicate that very discreetly. And we have to evaluate the needs of the patient and the family and take care of them. Another major thing is we don't have to decide for the patient and the family. We have to include them in formulating the individualized care plan. And what do we mean by care plan? In medicine, we're used to care for symptoms, for the physical. But there are more needs that the patients have and the relatives have. So we have to take care of the symptoms, we have to take care of the psychological issues, the social issues, the family, the work, spiritual needs. And we've been talking about spiritual needs today. And we have to prepare for that. We shouldn't come to the very end without having realizing what are the wishes of the patient. We have to identify certain things. We call those advanced directives. I think that not many of us have a living will, how we would like to be cared if we're sick, if we cannot communicate. This, we never thought of it. So we have to ask the patients in a very subtle way, with a nice timing. No, not at the diagnosis, but when you take a CT and you have a recurrence possibly, then there may be a time where we can discuss these things and find out what are the wishes of the patients. Are there any pending financial or legal issues? You may say we're doctors, we're nurses. This is not our job to do. But this may be the most important point of suffering of the patient, so we have to take care of that as well. And we have to prepare them for that. Another important issue, we have to encourage them to tell their life story. They need the narrative. They might want to leave a text for their young ones or a video. And we all have experienced that with the elderly people in our families. They go around and they grab us to tell their story. When I was young, I did this and this and this and that. And this is the legacy. And they need us to hear that. And we need to hear it and communicate. And then, of course, we have to train and support the caregivers in their role, which is very important. If we think where our patients are dying, most of them are not dying in the hospital. So who's taking care of them? Their relatives. And they need to be supported, and they need to know that they're doing the best for their loved ones. We have to identify who needs to be there at the time of death. Imagine you have somebody and the children are abroad. Should they call them back? Are they going to lose their work? When is the right time to call the children? if the patient wants the family to be there all together. We have to be there and encourage farewells. People should forgive each other. They should be able to go on afterwards. We've heard that from personal stories, Mrs. Belafonte, that the way that our loved ones are dying remains with us for the rest of our lives. So this is very important for everyone. We have to know about the rituals that are important to the patient, so we have to ask. And then, of course, we have to find out whether there will be a complicated grief afterwards and prepare beforehand. And also the very practical things. Is it a burial? Is it a cremation? Is there going to be an organ donation? All of these things we need to identify and talk with the patient and the family. Nobody wants to have pain. Nobody wants to die in pain. So we have to assess their pain, and we have to assess all the other symptoms. Is it agitation, delirium, dyspnea? Choking is a very difficult symptom to treat at the end of life. Feeding and hydration. How do we express our love to the newborns? We feed them. So this is the way that people are expressing their love to the people, to their relatives at the end of life. They try to feed them. They try to give them water. And when we say that this may not be beneficial to the patients, they would ask, should I let them starve? So we have to explain to them that the patients, their organs there's an organ failure. They cannot swallow, they will choke. So this is not the best for them. I'm sure that in Greek hospitals, you see people dying with the dripping or with the blood transfusion. And this is because in our medical schools, we are not trained in our undergraduate studies that we have to prepare our patients for death as well. Mouth problems. I'm sure you have waken up in the morning with a dry mouth, and this is very painful. This is something we have to take very good care at the end of life. And also bed sores. So we have to treat their symptoms, mostly opioids, and all the other symptoms. And another very important issue, which is also very difficult for the family to understand, is that we have to stop the medications which are not important now. Should I stop their antidiabetics? Should I stop the medication for hypertension? This is very difficult for the family to understand. But this is what we should be doing. And on the other hand, we should be prepared to have all the necessary medications that we need, like the analgesics, benzodiazepines, etc. 85% of deaths, the people are in a semi-comatose or a comatose state. And at least we understand that they're not suffering. Nobody has come up to tell us if they're suffering or not, but this is the notion that we have. But there is a 50% that people are agitated. They're shouting, they're pulling out tubes, and this is very painful, both for the patient and for the family. So in those cases, we have what we call palliative sedation. We decrease the level of consciousness of the patient, but in order to do that, we have to follow certain guidelines, which are very well written down. And this is very different to euthanasia, because the aim is very difficult. In palliative sedation, the aim is to ease the suffering of the patient. In euthanasia, it is to cause death to the patient. And the procedure that we are following is quite different. I wouldn't like to make this a medical talk and give you a medical jargon. I would like you to understand the importance of what are our needs at the end of life and what can a team of people, a palliative care team, can provide to patients. So I'm going to very briefly tell you the story of Mrs. Maria, who was an 84-year-old we cared for, and she was diagnosed with an inoperable pancreatic cancer, and they thought that curative treatment, would not be beneficial to her. She had pain and depression is quite common in pancreatic cancer. And in her social history, her mother died when she was young, so she had to raise her siblings, and she was married young and had her own family. This was a case of collusion, since the patient did not have a long time to live ahead. The daughter thought, expressing the love for her mother, that they shouldn't tell her that. But of course, the mother had heard of the word, something's wrong with the pancreas, so she knew what was going on. But they lost the opportunity to communicate that. Anyway, the mother died in our care. So we received a letter, and I thought that sharing some of the key points of that letter with you would give you an idea how the family, and through the words of the family, the patient experiences palliative care at the end of life. So the letter started, "Dear members of the Galilee family, a family that accepts whoever is in need and turns them into the beloved kin." So what we understood of that is that they understand that we are a family. The caregiver, the professional caregivers are a family. And this is quite strong, which means that there is a bond in our team in order to provide care. Of course, there are challenges, like there are in families. It's not very easy to create a team. And the strongest medication in palliative care are not the opioids. They're the therapeutic relationship that the team is creating with the family. There's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of being there and not being abandoned. That's a great fear of our patients. Are you going to be there when I need you? So this is 24/7. So we're there to support, we're there to ease their suffering. We feel obliged to express our gratitude for the help you have provided to our mother at the end of her life. After all, this is the only thing you have asked from us, love and collaboration in performing your work. So an authentic letter of gratitude. They didn't need to send this one, but this thank you is very important to the young professionals that are doing this work. And in our unit, they're experiencing one death every 2 days. This is a lot for young people. Sometimes they say, this is unnatural. We shouldn't be talking about these things all the time. We're very young. We should be going out there. And the other thing is that the services, at least in Europe, are free of charge. Another important issue in palliative care, which we were not taught in medical school, is you have to be open to have a relationship there. You have to have your professional barriers. But you have to be open. You have to face your own fears. You have to face your own limitations while you're providing that care. Because you face death all the time. And there are many times when you really think you cannot do anything, but just being present, which is very important. We were very reluctant to call you at first because we did not know what to expect. But the alternative was to transfer our mother to the hospital. We wanted to spare her the inconvenience and respect her wish to stay at home. So we need to raise public awareness worldwide, especially in Greece, about what palliative care is and what palliative care can provide. They were justified in their reservations, but they had no other alternative. The hospitals are for people with acute diseases. They're for the emergencies, and they're very good, but they're not good for chronic patients, and they're not good for the end of life, because there's no possibility to care for the social and the practical needs of patients. Since the first meeting, we realized you were a gift from God. And this I could not understand at the beginning. How can we make a difference with just one visit? But then I realized that we can do things immediately. Tell them how to turn the patient, how to do the bodily care in bed, how to feed them. And then we can treat their pain right away. And another very important issue, we can reinforce them in their role as caregiver. And this is very important for the family. And train them and support them and be present there all the time, either in person or on the phone. The different traits of girls, as my mother used to call them, were presented as follows. They were knowledgeable professionals by her side, professionals who care and help each other in their own domain. So they bring up the issue that healthcare professionals should have knowledge, they should have skills, but appropriate behavior as well. And they should complement each other in what they're providing. And also communication skills and resilience. She listened and complied to the doctors' and nurses' suggestions, and I'm sure that the discussions with the social worker eased the burden of her soul, because she talked about issues that probably had not been discussed with no one during her whole lifespan. So it's the importance, as I said, of life closure, of forgiveness, of farewells, and of the legacy. And you mentioned before, and it's very important, we have to be compassionate listeners, and we have to use silence. Silence is not embarrassment. Silence gives time to bring up emotions, time to recapitulate what we want to say. We doctors are very bad. Every 10 seconds we interrupt our patients to ask the questions we want. So as a final remark, I could not give you in 15 minutes the values and what palliative care is. I cannot give you the organizational structure, for whom it is, who provides this, when should be provided, that network that needs to be around, is it cost effective, issues that are being discussed. And neither did I give you how we here in Greece have materialized the international model of palliative care in treating our patients. I have just tried to highlight the important issues at the end of life and how the family experiences and how a palliative care team can care for them. Thank you very much.
I have to stand up because I am the beneficiary of palliative care for my family, and people who choose to be in palliative care and hospice care are living angels, really. It's such a tremendous gift for the living to have someone who can guide you through the process and to have the trust and the reassurance that your loved one is being handled with such care and knowledge. So thank you so much for what you do and for being such a support system to us. Okay, Theodoros, please.
So my name is Theodoros. I would like to thank Alexandra Mitsotakis and Myrto Vounatsou for inviting me to speak to you about things doctors don't want to speak and they're afraid to speak, which is death. We're in Elefsina, which is the place where our ancestors, all of our ancestors, came to learn about death and feel a little bit better when that time comes. A difficult time for all of us, And this place, through the centuries, it remained a center of this, my apologies, this formation of spiritual understanding of death. As the centuries went by, we approached our era, where medicine started picking up. The last 150 years, modern medicine became what it is today. We have all these specialties, all these advancements, and we managed to improve our life expectancy by decades, lots of decades. As this process happened, we gradually turned our back to death. It seemed that our fear of death, instead of us understanding more about death, we chose not to look at death. It was our ego, it was our will to improve even more our quality of care, our life expectancy, almost to the level of hubris. But death is always waiting for us. And at the end, this is what will happen for all of us. It's a fearful event, but it shouldn't be that way. In modern medicine, in ICU setting, that's intensive care units, we deal with death every day with different ages and very bad diseases that are extremely painful physically and emotionally. As that time comes, where a person loses his ability to sustain life, we take over, give him some time in intensive care units, and to give him the opportunity to come back. Obviously, we're not gods. And many times, we don't succeed. That moment that our capacity as medical personnel, doctors, nurses, everybody, diminishes when we realize that we lost a battle and our egos get shattered. That's the point where, as humans, we can flourish. And this is the most important time in our lives as patients and as doctors. That moment is a very crucial moment. It's a huge opportunity to help somebody that lost all hope, him and his relatives. This is where our ancestor intelligence is needed, the one that we lost down the centuries. This is the time that we need help to come together and help these people when they're dying. It's not only about them, it's about us. It's the moment that all our efforts for Evdαιμονία and flourishing crumble. It's death. But through various new ways of medication, meditation, spirituality, we can come together and conquer this last bit of our patients' lives. Together, we can conquer that event. Flourishing and Evdαιμονία are something, it's a lifelong process. And it should continue all the way till the end of our lives, of their lives. We can manage this with various ways, but most importantly, we should stick together. This is the time where we can reach higher levels of consciousness, of connection with each other, and move forward. Unfortunately, the medical community has not evolved to such an amount to be able to conquer these things. We turn our back, as I said. We're afraid, our egos are shattered, but they need us right there. This is where we are needed most. This is our opportunity to come to higher levels of virtue, of respect, of dignity for ourselves as medical personnel, and as patients. This is a time to reach higher levels of Evdαιμονία and flourish at that most difficult moment of our lives and their lives. As medical personnel, we always say, I want to die well. I don't want to be in pain. Don't do this, don't do that. Surprisingly, when we don't talk about it, we always talk about it within us. But it's time to come out in the public and actually talk about things that are very difficult. This is a time that the new evolutionary step of mankind can happen, where death is not the end, but it's a process towards moving to a different state. The thermodynamic law says always that energy is not lost, it just switches form. And this is something we need to understand. So, this is something that all of us have experienced, as doctors, as relatives, the fear of death. Dying, the process of dying. It shouldn't be that way. It should be a phase in our lives that we can move forward, we can flourish. We can understand the true values of the person that is dying. We should respect that person and his value. He should be dying, or she should be dying in dignity, respect. Now, it's not an easy process. These are years and years of one way of thinking. We should actually switch the way we think. The end should come in a peaceful way. No person should be in pain. No person should be in agony. No person should feel their death the way they do in ICUs. We have awake patients that they're experiencing death every day. The feelings, the pain, which are our best. Medication don't work. We have a palliative care, somehow, a team about pain, about a psychologist, psychiatrist that comes in and helps, but it's not enough. The agony is always there, and the agony transfers to us doctors. And this is something that we need to continue in purpose, and help one another. This is a time for us to come together and actually look in the future. Death should not be a tragic moment, which is a tragic moment, make no mistake, but it should be a time of reconciliation, of coming together, of respecting, celebrating the values of our deceased one or our loved one, and then moving forward. Not in agony, not with any guilt, peacefully, the way it should be, the way our ancestors taught us, and we forgot.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I want to open it up for some questions, so maybe think a bit about what you might want to ask. And as you're doing that, I will share that we're so afraid of the unknown, many of us, and I'm wondering if perhaps we can find a way to not just in Eleusis but globally discover our spiritual and ceremonial practices so that we can once again invite the mystery and the opportunity to have a deeper understanding of the hereafter, shall we say. I was also very well aware that when my mother was passing, it wasn't just the morphine that was helping her be out of pain, but it was oxygen. It was oxygen that was really keeping her alive. And so when they said it's time to pull the oxygen with the, that she was getting, it was, I'm sorry, it's still soon for me, but it was an incredible thing to witness, to see her physical body gasping for that. It was a transformative experience to witness, and I really believe, because my mother was such a partier, that there was something to celebrate in that. So I hope that we can somehow reclaim the mysteries and the pilgrimage and the opportunity for us to gather in ceremonial circles, to not be so afraid. And also what you had said about, when do you tell the people to come? Because often I've experienced that with other family members. It was when the family left the room that then the person passed away, and they always felt like, oh my God, I was with them all the time. And then when I left, it was when they passed away. So there's also something to be said, to be very sensitive, perhaps, because maybe your loved one is holding on for you, where when you leave, they also can feel the relief to let go. Anyway, thank you for indulging me. Do we have a microphone for some folks who might have questions? Also, before the question, the other thing I wanted to say about psychedelics is the use of psychedelics at the end of life to help a person feel at ease, or to help them feel transcendent or their own meaning. It can also help us on the road to the end of our life. Those of us who have anxiety, those of us who have PTSD, it's a little, I don't know. All I'm saying is we might not want to wait until the end of life to experience something like a psilocybin or an MDMA or an experience like that.
It seems to me that our reluctance to face death, or maybe even almost our denial of death as a transition, is deeply embedded in our culture, at least in our Western culture. So wouldn't the point where we should begin to address this be education? And shouldn't we start to educate our children to develop a different attitude towards death? Because I think if we start with the adults, it's already too late. We have it internalized.
Did you say education? Did you say? Yeah. I think that's everything. I think with psychedelics now, I think we need real good public education. And with things like death, and I think in Greece, where a lot of work has to be done, it's all about public education. It's all about how we do that. And it works. Public education works. It works. We have a lot of proof of how it works throughout the ages. So, yeah, I think so.
I think also perhaps the more we begin to embrace familial ceremonial practices, especially in the United States, there's so many traditions and practices of our indigenous people, of our ancestors, of our elders that we just discard. And if there was a way for us to make it part of the normal process in the life of our family as we grow, is also the education that we can absorb.
Just echoing you and supporting you, it's washed out of the culture, that kind of language. We don't do that. Nor do we talk about spirituality. The great Alan Watts once said, because kids all the time have little spiritual experiences in the woods, little peak experiences. There's no context to go home and say, oh, Mommy, I was in the woods today and I felt this feeling. There's no place for it in the culture, increasingly so, nor about death. And it should be normalized. It is, right? It's part of life. The great George Harrison, the Beatle, as he was dying, he said to his wife, you can't wait for the end of life to prepare for this.
Yes.
And most religion really used to be about that was the arc of the religious, the mission of the religion, to practice death. But we've not. It's been pushed out increasingly so. Because this makes us feel immortal, but we're not.
I'd like to ask, because if I think about all the things you're saying in terms of an adult, it happening to an adult, it happening to someone who's had a lot of life already behind them, then I can totally see this new approach or this more spiritual approach of how to look at death. It all kind of disappears if I imagine a child dying. So I would like to ask all of you, but maybe especially also you two working in the ICU or with palliative care, how all of what you said might apply to the death of someone who hasn't lived a very long time yet. Can you just take it one-on-one, or would we have to approach it differently?
So it's never easy. Let's start with that. Okay, and when I came here, I thought about exactly that. It's good in theory, and it's good for all the people that are end of their lives, and we love them, and they leave, and they depart. It's extremely difficult for youngsters, and it is so difficult for us. I had 16-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, even now, as we speak, I have a patient that she will die, 20 years of age. This is exactly where we need all of this. I know it sounds a little bit theoretical, but once you experience it from our point of view, then it's necessary. It's not, we need to go that way. That's why our ancestral intelligence is so important, because that's what they taught them. Their life expectancy was so low that they had youngsters dying all the time. For us, it's a little bit better, but still it's there. Life will go away eventually. No matter what age you are, you can die. And this is where we need everything. Psychedelics, spirituality, every help that there is out there is needed because of that. It's not easy. It's easy in words, But I'll give you an example. I had a patient who was around 18 to 20 years of age. I can't remember. Sometimes we choose not to remember. So painful. So he was suffering from fever, convulsions. We tried everything. We brought all the teams in. We tried everything. The kid died at the end. His family comes in, and we are expecting now everything, from verbal attacks, and they come in. They were very religious. And I said, thank you. What was the reason for this? Now, I was in shock. Their loved one died, 20 years of age, with their whole lives ahead of them, as you said. And they said, thank you, it's okay. And that was so comforting for us. We felt relieved. Our human self was so relieved. That's it.
It's very difficult to accompany young patients. And you have the parents there, and you have them at the hospice, so you're there 24/7 with them. You accompany them. And what's more difficult is to be there and accompany them in that trajectory. We think that cancer is the worst. I don't know if you know about ALS, those neurodegenerative disorders, where the people cannot communicate in the end as well. And those are young patients, and we have young patients in our unit with ALS. It's very difficult to be there with the family. It's very unnatural to lose a child. It's very unnatural to see your child suffering for so long. But it's just being there. It's the relationship. It's doing whatever you can.
I also think that there is the concept and the idea that we're not exploring in this particular session, which is the spirit. And perhaps the spirit that came through this lifetime, in this incarnation, in this body, did what it needed to do, had the purpose, that it functioned, and now it is releasing itself so that it can come back once again. So, we're not exploring, so quote unquote, psychic or life on the other side, or the actual. I mean, some people believe that we all the spirits have we have a contract when we come through. We somehow, it isn't in our consciousness what the contract is, but maybe we have to somehow build a trust. So if we die too soon, for those of us that are left, to wish and hope that person was still in our lives. I mean, we're human too, and we also have to give ourselves some grace, because our ego gets attached. We have attachments. We become close to many things that necessarily we're not close to. So we also as humans have to give ourselves some grace in the process of witnessing death and dying with young people, whether it's war or whether it's execution or whatever it is. When someone you feel should not have gone or went too soon, there's a lesson in that perhaps for us.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all 5 of you for sharing with us all very personal experiences and thoughts. And I want maybe to build a bridge back from the ancient times to today. When the mysteries happened, it was a very exclusive gathering. It was even forbidden to talk about it. I think the experience that those humans made, our ancestors, so to say, helped them a lot to live a better life. Now we are sharing all this information that is essential for everybody on the planet. Because once we understand our mortality, is exactly what connects us with all the other human beings. We will be transformed. And why we are doing this with the World Human Forum is also we are seeking for keys, not for immortality, but for keys to solve the biggest problems of our time. And my feeling while I was listening to all 5 of you was, and maybe you can referred to that also quickly. Isn't it that if we realize and don't run away from our mortality anymore, which is one of maybe the biggest taboo of our times, that we have to leave the planet, once we really all acknowledge this as a reality and maybe have experience helping with drugs or any kind of things to get closer to this, that our more dignity is growing, and maybe that will be a key to stop all these other bad habits that destroy the planet. Exploitation, materialism, destruction of the planet, wars. We are facing so many wars. How ridiculous it is. In the end, we all have to die. And why are we not seeking for the for the happiness for all of us? So my question is really, how can we make this, even us being here now, is quite exclusive, I have to say. And once you touch the subject of mortality in any kind of gatherings, people, you have all this experience, they try to change subject. Why we are doing that? That's my question. Can we unlock this to become much more, universal about this topic? So I would be really interested what ideas you have in mind that this subject is becoming a real global subject to get us to the next level of humanity.
I think you were nice enough to give the answer in your question.
I didn't give the answer.
Yeah, you did, but you did because you did it beautifully. I mean, I think that's what's happening now in the States a lot, and I think the pandemic really changed things. Who's more aware of grief these days in their life? Grief. Who's aware of grief? Not someone, just grief in general, the idea of grief. So that's a lot of hands. Something happened with the pandemic, and it was like this global existential wake-up call. And I don't think we're processing it still. I think we flew out of the pandemic, and here we are, and we just went through that. That death was everywhere and suffering. But yeah, you did answer your own question beautifully. I think that's the mission. To talk more about it, to make it part of the conversation. People often ask sometimes, if they're new to this, isn't it depressing? You speak about death all the time. It's actually the opposite, I promise you. By being with it, by talking about it, it liberates you from the fear of it down the road somewhere, and you could live in the moment. That's the point of it. That's the point of people who practice meditation and spirituality. But yeah, there has to be this global turn towards a greater awareness of it, and it is happening.
I think it's happening.
In America, it's happening big time. It's happened across the globe, and yet we see stupidity all around us, wars and all of that, and humans, But yeah, and that's the point, to make us more aware of the end of life, which is part of life.
I also don't want to exclude culture and art in the process, because often, especially when someone is making their transition, we play music, a lot of music. Or if someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, we play music to help them recall and remember and have a sense of being and belonging. When my mother passed away, my partner came into the room just as she was taking her last breath, and he held her feet, and I don't know if it was good for her or not, but for him, he felt like he was still grounding her to the earth, and he sat with her for about 2 hours after she passed, and he said you could feel her in the room. You could feel her presence there, but it was very calm and peaceful. There wasn't a feeling of agitation or anything like that. And I think the more we have conversations, whether it's here or with our children or with our children's friends, or bringing up the topic, I'm one for bringing up uncomfortable conversation at the dinner table, just to get it out there and start speaking about it, so we're not so charged emotionally about whatever the topic might be. So I think the more conversations we have and opportunities to share from different perspectives, in a healing way, I think I think over here and then over there.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for an enlightening presentation. Would anybody like to end the morning on a note of triumph? Anybody?
Sure.
Triumph?
I don't know if we're ending it, but go ahead.
Yes. Okay. In 1992, I had already made 3 films on American Indian spiritual religious issues. And I received a phone call from my film partner, Gary Ryan, in California, who said, something calamitous has happened, something catastrophic has happened. The U.S. Supreme Court, in all its dubious wisdom, has just banned peyote. According to my friend Houston Smith, the world's oldest continuously practiced religion, at least 10,000 years old. And so can you help us? We've just been asked by Reuben Snake, who Houston called the American Indians' Dalai Lama. Pretty good tag, right? To help us rally and defeat this. So within a few weeks, Gary and I, our film partners, we gathered the money together from Jeffrey Bronfman of the Bronfman fortune. He just said, write up a budget, I'm in. Why? Because he said we need to try to stop the American Holocaust here in North America. We have to allow American Indians to practice like the rest of us. So very quickly, we raised the money. We went down to northern Mexico on a peyote pilgrimage. That is what they call it. 30 days into the pilgrimage fields, you gather the pilgrimage, the cactus plant, and then you come out again. And then we gathered with 50 tribes, from the Inuits in the north to the tribes from Tierra del Fuego at the tip of South America. They built an entire village for us so we could film the practices for a week in secrecy, so we wouldn't be assaulted by the government, either of America or the government of Mexico. And they're called prayer meetings, not getting high. People use the phrase entheogen because you are ingesting the peyote in order to see God, but see God to help healing in battle, in death, any kind of pain. So we filmed our practices there and then came back to the north and interviewed representatives of every imaginable religion in America and asked them what the consequences would be if we stopped indigenous people from practicing a very old religion. So I, as the director and writer, I interviewed people from the Jewish community, the Islamic community, every imaginable one, who saw that it was a disaster. Why? Because the U.S. Supreme Court said, by using the precedent of the Supreme Court, Jewish rabbis were actually sent to jail for practicing circumcision. American Catholic priests were actually arrested for drinking wine. So we made the film, and we made 3 versions of it. Just for any of you who ever have any doubt about the power of writing or filming in order to change the world, we made 3 versions, a 64-minute version of the film for film festivals, 50 minutes for TV, and then a 7-minute version that we could take to Congress. We took this film to Congress and we offered everybody in the Senate and the House of Representatives, do you have an hour? Who has an hour in Washington, D.C.? Do you have a half hour? Very few people had a half hour. So we showed a 7-minute version of this struggle, having the right to have a psychedelic experience, a vision of God. Everybody in the U.S. Congress and the House of Representatives saw the film, and we overturned the U.S. Supreme Court. 1993, and it's called the Native American Religious Freedom Act. And I have a bill on my wall signed by Bill Clinton and Tip O'Neill, giving American Indians the right to practice what you are so poetically urging us to do in our own private lives. Thank you very much.
The power of the arts. Alexandra. Just 1 second, 1 moment, I'm so sorry. Go. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Just 3 short comments. Thank you, first of all. The first is that it's amazing that borrowing a term from Jochen, you said you used before, we are here 2,500 years after. searching for similar keys. Here in Elefsina, keys of flourishing. So we are in the center of an informal mystery today, here. And thank you for that also. Second, watching Poppy and Anthony sitting next to each other, I'm really eager to be present, witnessing a dialogue between them about psychedelics in present and in the past. And third, I just use a quote from Aliki, that it was just a tiny phrase, but I want really to denote and stay on that. The phrase, which is actually implies an action, the action of thanking. Thank you. It's an action. I apologize. It's an action. Embracing is an action. I'm just denoting these three because we use them a lot in actors' training in order to gently expand ourselves toward the other on the path of sort of experiencing flourishing of the self. But thank you for this striking panel.
Thank you.
We thank
Just to kind of come off to your thank you line, I want to add something to it. People know the four things at the end of life we are good to say. There's some books on it. 4 things. Thank you. I love you. Please forgive me. I forgive you. And there's been a lot written about those 4 themes. They touch so much.
Yes. Alexandra, yes.
To Jochen's comment and Michael's to bring it back down to earth, but I would really like to ask Aliki how it is that we had a lot of trouble to find one institution like yours in Greece. And when we found it, we knew it was absolutely necessary to invite you here with us. And what we can do through this type of conversation, very practically, to make something change and have more of your kind of institutions around, and how we can help and how you can help us to achieve that. And one last little comment that has to do with children passing away, because this touched me very deeply. And I know that, I don't know, maybe Tony, you and I had that conversation one day, but I remember reading somewhere that a 7-year-old boy who was dying said that he was sad because his mom was sad. And I know from you that the work you do with psychedelics is also tremendously helping the families to deal with grief. So maybe this is something we should remember also. But my main question goes to Aliki.
Thank you for the question, and I said before for the invitation. You know, I was in the cancer hospital as a gynecological oncologist for 27 years. And when we started Galilee, we had a collaboration with the cancer hospital. And in the beginning, we had no patients being referred. So I went to my friends, the doctors, and I said, why don't you refer patients? And they couldn't understand what I was talking about. They couldn't understand this service. We doctors believe that we provide palliative care services. Palliative care is not in our undergraduate studies. It's not in the postgraduate studies. We are not being taught communication skills. And this is very important. So I was in another conference once, and I said, what can we do for palliative care? We're trying to have a law for palliative care in order to have services for the past 15 years at least, and others before us for longer. We had a law 2 years ago, but now we're waiting for the ministerial decrees. If we don't have a law, us in Galilee, actually, we don't exist. Our Reverend Nikolaos, the Metropolitan, who would have been here, calls it the Agio Chaos, the sacred chaos, which means that we're working without a license. with different licenses because there's not a law. So you need to have the law. You need to train the professionals, and you also need to raise public awareness. People should be asking for these services, but people don't know. And sometimes they ask me, what is palliative care? Doctors, my colleagues. And really, I cannot explain it in words. And you can understand here in this audience because you can understand what experience is. Sometimes I ask them back, what is love? Can you define love for me? You cannot define love. This is an experience. And I think you cannot define palliative care. You have to experience the need of patients in suffering, of your relatives, of your loved ones, to understand what palliative care is offering. When I left the hospital to go to Galilee, they told me, are you going to stop operating and go and hold the hands of people that are dying? Is this what you're offering to patients? So they don't understand. So we need to raise public awareness.
I'm a very, very, very proud Greek American, as you know. I've come in 40 years. It's a big part of my life, my Greek heritage. It pains me to see the status of palliative care here. It has to move. It has to progress. And the contrast where things are now in other countries, it's hard, but it has to progress.
Hospice has become quite hospice in the United States. I had never heard of hospice until the AIDS pandemic, when many patients went into hospice, and I was like, well, what is hospice? Not only what is hospice, but when do you ask for hospice to begin? Because hospice, I don't know if there's a difference, maybe there is. Hospice, from my understanding, can last months, and whereas palliative care is really the very end, or no? Please tell me the difference.
Real quick, so definitions.
I think that palliative care is a new medical specialization. It started back in the 50s in the UK, but later in the world. So when it started, it was for the end of life. But what we found out afterwards was that there's never an end of life. It's never the time to call for a hospice care. And the other thing, you don't have time to prepare. So the idea now is that you provide palliative care at the beginning, an advisory service for all the patients with chronic diseases that are life-limiting or they're threatening your life. And then you can have a consultation. And if you get well, there's no recurrence, there's no, for instance, cardiac patients, COPD patients, neurological patients, neurodegenerative, they need it through all their life trajectory because they're deteriorating slowly. If you have cancer, you might get well. So in the beginning, you need palliative care as an advisory service. And then if you get well, okay, together with your treatment. If you have a recurrence, then you know the people and you know what they can offer. So you're not afraid to go there because you will die. So this is a myth. Palliative care is from the very beginning. I think that, Anthony, you agree.
Yeah, it's a big difference. So in the States, hospice is, for a lot of legal and insurance reasons too, 6 months or less, give or take. Palliative care anywhere along the arc of a life-threatening illness, potentially. So today you get diagnosed, you're feeling great. You could have either medical, psychiatric, spiritual services available to you through palliative care, and you get healed. But palliative care is a discipline for the arc of the illness. Sadly, most people call a palliative care service at the end. So a lot of what we do in hospitals, educate the doctors, don't wait till the end to call us earlier on. And speaking of that, a weird thing that happens in hospitals, an unfortunate thing, doctors won't call us, the palliative care service, to come help a patient until the very end, and they'll say, can you come and tell the person that, versus calling us weeks, months, years before, right? So the goal is to engage palliative care early on, and hospices that last 6 months.
Okay. Well, let us all take a deep breath together, shall we? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, inhale. And exhale. Again, inhale. And exhale. One more time. Inhale. And exhale. And now just very quickly, everyone take their left hand and just tap your right hand, and we'll anchor this conversation. And these will be our applause for our incredible panel. Thank you so much.